In the quiet Louisiana woods where duck calls used to echo at sunrise and faith was talked about more than being famous, the man who built a big company has died. Phil Robertson, the duck commander himself, has passed away at the age of 79. The news made fans of Duck Dynasty, the hunting world, and millions of people who came to love the bearded father's strong values and honest personality very sad. He wasn't a movie star. He wasn't smooth, practiced, or politically correct. But he was real, and that realness, tough, spiritual, sometimes controversial, made a path from the backwoods of Louisiana to America's television screens and hearts. As we say goodbye to Phil Robertson, we remember not just the TV personality, but the father, preacher, and cultural icon who left behind more than money. He left behind a legacy. Phil Alexander Robertson was born on April 24, 1946, in Vivian, Louisiana. He was the sixth of 7 children in a family that lived off the land. Phil's childhood was anything but fancy. They didn't have much. No electricity, little money. But they had toughness, determination, and a connection with nature that would shape Phil's future. From a young age, Phil loved being outdoors. Hunting, fishing, and living off the land weren't just fun activities. They were how to survive. It's what he knew, and it's what he loved. Even though he loved the wild, Phil was also an athlete. He got a football scholarship to Louisiana Tech University, where he was the starting quarterback ahead of none other than future Hall of Famer Terry Bradshaw. But Phil's priorities were different. While others dreamed of stadium lights, he dreamed of open skies and bayou mornings. He turned down the NFL to go back to the woods, a decision many people thought was crazy until they saw what he built. But before the empire came the darkness. Phil's early adult years were marked by personal struggles, including drinking too much alcohol and cheating on his wife. It was a rough period that almost tore his family apart. But it was also the period that led him to faith, a deep born-again change that redefined his life and shaped everything that came after. In 1973, Phil invented his own duck call, a simple tool that copied the exact sound of a duck, something existing models failed to do well. He called it the Duck Commander. What started as a small homemade operation slowly grew into a business, empire powered by faith, family, and Phil's relentless commitment to being authentic. By the time the company got national attention, it had already become a well-known name in hunting circles. But it wasn't until 2012, with the launch of A&E's Duck Dynasty, that Phil's world reached mainstream America. The show was unlike anything else on television. It featured a bearded Louisiana family who made duck calls, prayed before meals, and got into all kinds of funny adventures, all while delivering moral lessons and celebrating traditional values. Phil was the rock of the series, quiet yet commanding, wise but never preachy. He delivered one-liners and scripture with equal confidence. For many, he became a symbol of unwavering belief in an increasingly complex world. Duck Dynasty ran for 11 seasons and became one of the most successful reality shows in cable history. But the real story wasn't about ratings. It was about the message. Each episode ended with the family sitting around the dinner table, holding hands and praying. In a media landscape filled with drama and division, this simple act resonated. Phil's presence grounded the show. His words offered comfort, challenge, and clarity. The Robertson family became celebrities, yet they never quite fit the mold. They weren't chasing fame. They were living their truth. And Phil made sure that truth was always rooted in Scripture. He spoke often about redemption, about overcoming sin, and about the hope that comes through Christ. His unapologetic faith won him admiration and criticism. In 2013, Phil faced backlash for comments he made in a magazine interview, leading to a temporary suspension from the show. But his family stood by him, and fans rallied behind the patriarch. The incident only amplified Phil's influence. He wasn't politically correct, but to many he was morally consistent. To his family, Phil was more than a TV character or a business founder. He was a father who led by example, a grandfather who shared wisdom with quiet conviction, and a mentor who never stopped teaching. His sons Willie, Jace, Jep, and Alan have often spoken about how their father's transformation saved the family. From a man who once nearly lost it all, Phil became the spiritual anchor of the Robertson clan. He taught them not just how to hunt or run a business, he taught them how to live with purpose. In his later years, Phil spent less time in front of the camera and more time preaching, writing, and speaking to churches and men's groups across the country. His voice became synonymous with spiritual awakening. His books, including Happy, Happy, Happy and Uncancelled, became bestsellers, further extending his reach beyond television. Phil believed that no soul was beyond redemption. He lived it. He preached it, and his life was proof of it. In the wake of his passing, Phil's children shared emotional tributes that poured out with both grief and gratitude. Willie Robertson, the CEO of Duck Commander, said, "Dad wasn't perfect, but he was redeemed, and that made him fearless. He taught us to work hard, speak truth, and trust God. I'll miss him every day, but I know exactly where he is." Jace Robertson remembered the early days of the family business. "I remember scraping duck calls together in our little shop, watching Dad pour his whole life into this thing. Not for money, but for mission. He believed God could use anything, even a duck call, to change lives." Even Sadie Robertson Huff, Phil's granddaughter and one of the most prominent next-generation voices, shared her heartbreak. "My papa loved Jesus more than anything, and he never hid that. I'm who I am because of his courage to turn his life around and lead with love." The tributes were raw, unfiltered, and deeply moving, just like Phil. Phil Robertson's words often echoed louder than the duck calls he built. His storytelling, usually sprinkled with humor, hunting metaphors and scripture, carried a weight that transcended entertainment. He once said, "Money can come and go, fame is a vapor, but what you believe and how you treat people, that's what echoes in eternity." And it's true. Phil never seemed seduced by celebrity. He saw his platform as a pulpit, and whether it was in front of cameras, at church gatherings, or by the campfire, he used that platform to point people to something or someone bigger than himself. Through controversy, triumph, ridicule, and reverence, Phil stayed the same course. He ran his race, and as his family now steps into the future without his voice, they carry his values like a torch passed from one generation to the next. It's easy to remember Phil Robertson as the larger-than-life Duck Commander, the figure who stood at the center of a media empire. But those closest to him remember a man who woke before sunrise to pray, who counseled friends quietly in his living room, who baptized strangers in the river behind his house. Neighbors recall how he always made time for a handshake, a word of encouragement, or a joke. He lived simply even when wealth found him. He gave generously, though rarely publicly. He didn't preach from a stage of pride, but from a platform of transformation. Phil's life wasn't sanitized or safe. It was real, raw, and deeply redeemed. And that's what makes it so powerful. His story is not just about success, it's about grace. As the sun sets over the Louisiana woods and the last echoes of a duck call fade into the bayou, we remember Phil Robertson not for the empire he built, but for the man he became. From a rough-edged rebel to a redeemed leader, from a broken man to a blessed patriarch, Phil's life is a reminder that no one is beyond restoration. His final call may have sounded, but his voice will carry on in the prayers of his family, the echoes of his faith, and the millions of lives he touched. Rest in peace, Duck Commander. You've gone home.